But thank you all so much for being here to learn more about La Casa Latina here at the University of Pennsylvania. We're excited to tell you more about the resources that we have for students. I'm going to just do a brief introduction of myself before I turn it over to our staff over at La Casa Latina. My name is Molly Scherner, and I'm an assistant director of admissions here at Penn. So I do read applications for Virginia and West Virginia specifically, but also help put on these virtual events that we have throughout the year just to kind of help you guys as you're in the middle of your college search and gathering more information. I do also want to start with a land acknowledgement. Acknowledging that Penn does occupy the traditional homelands of the Lenape, and we acknowledge this to express gratitude to Indigenous people, both past and present, for the opportunity to live and learn on Lenape-Hoke land of the Lenape. So that's enough about me. I am going to turn it over to Evelyn and Dr. Krista Cortez from La Casa Latina, and also let Evelyn share her screen so we can dive into the presentation. But thank you guys so much again for being here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name, as Molly said, is Dr. Krista Cortez, and I serve as the director of one of Penn's cultural resource centers called La Casa Latina. And on the call with us today is one of our program assistants, a rising senior. Evelyn, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn. Like Krista mentioned, I'm working with La Casa Latina. I'm a rising senior. I'm studying management and social impact at the Wharton School. I don't know. Yeah, I guess we can begin. So just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today. We're just going to go over who is La Casa Latina, who are we, what do we do? We're going to go over some of our programming that we do during the school year. The partnerships and collaborations we have on campus and off campus, and then just some quick contact information at the end, as well as question and answer session.
So to kick us off, we wanted to ask everyone who's joining us today to think about what a cultural tradition is that you like to celebrate. And we invite you to drop your answers into the chat so that we can consider our similarities and learn from our differences, which speaks very much to what we do here at La Casa Latina in trying to highlight the many cultural traditions that comprise the Latinx community and take it as an opportunity to learn with and from each other because as you may know, the Latina community is vibrant and diverse, and we like to celebrate and bring attention to that in the work that we do at La Casa Latina. So feel free to go ahead and drop some of those answers, and I want to pass the mic back to Evelyn.
Cool. So to give a quick overview of La Casa Latina, our center is one of 6 cultural centers at the University of Pennsylvania. And while we're geared towards Latinx identifying students, the center is open to everyone and anyone that wants to come in, that wants to learn, that wants to hang out with us, and in general, open to learning about Latinx culture and issues. It is a very inclusive space. There's always a lot of events going on. Doors are also always open. It is just in general a very welcoming center. And it's actually one of the first centers that received me when I was visiting UPenn's campus when I was a high school senior. So that's a little bit about our center. And then this is just a quick tour of La Casa Latina and also the Arch Building, which right now the Arch Building hosts 2 other cultural centers, and that is Macu and Patch, which we will talk about a little bit in the later slides.
Hey man, what's happening? Come on in. Let's party. Pick up your bass.
Yeah, that's a quick tour of our center. As you can see, you know, we have La Salita, we have a place for people to just come in, sit, chat with one another. We also have like sort of a pantry, coffee station, microwave situation going on. We have some computers for people that want to come in, do some studying, some printing. And then we have our offices for our wonderful directors, assistant directors, and also program assistants. To go over our mission and what La Casa stands for. So La Casa aims to develop awareness of Latinx issues, culture, and identity. They aim to provide a supportive environment for students to discuss and understand issues. And this is regarding to, again, Latinx culture or anything beyond. We just want to provide that space for students to feel comfortable to come in and talk about any challenges that they have going on, or maybe just highlights that they have going on throughout the week. La Casa also offers resources and services that foster the integration of academic, social, cultural, and community service activities to enrich the Penn experience. And then we also engage with our community on campus through programs, events, and dialogues. Oh, Krista, you're muted.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our staff. Here I am. As I mentioned earlier, I am the director of La Casa Latina. I work with two wonderful women, Rosalyn Guzman and Elsie Lopez. Rosalyn serves as our associate director. In her role, she largely works with student organizations. There are approximately 15 student organizations that we work directly with in the center, supporting them in their programming, in their leadership. And Elsie, as the program coordinator, also works with different student groups and students who come in and need help, particularly around programming that they do. And so collectively, we're here to support students. We have open doors and are happy to receive folks at any point during the day. And in addition to working with students, we collaborate across campus with different campus partners. Next. So some of the programming that we do as like one arm of our work are Lightning Talks. Lightning Talks was a program that came out of the pandemic where we interviewed different current students and recent graduates to hear about the interesting work that they do and kind of shine a spotlight on our amazing community and inspire younger folks about the different types of career paths and opportunities there are while at Penn and then after. We have a weekly program called Cafecito. It's an informal check-in space that we hold around cafe traditionally being a time for folks to share, right, and connect. And so we hold that space weekly for students to stop by and check in with us, be in community with each other, and we do our best to provide snacks during that time because we know that you can't have your cafecito without a little snack. Additionally, we have some signature programs like Festival Latinx, which you'll hear about more in detail later. We do a series of programming for Latinx Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th every year. We have a new tradition, Latinx graduation. It is our bilingual ceremony for graduating students, both undergrad and from the graduate and professional schools. And then we also hold the HEAL program, which is a collective space for graduate students.
Yeah, and as you can see, as the pictures that were slowly popping up on the screen, while these are signature events and events that happen weekly or on a routine basis, La Casa holds a lot more other events. Like you saw, they hosted like watch parties in La Salita for the World Cup. They do a big series of Dia de los Muertos events and so on. To go a little bit more into Latinx Heritage Month. So as you all may know, Latinx Heritage Month takes place from September 15th to October 15th. And it is during this time that many Latin American nations celebrate their independence. And at the University of Pennsylvania, Latinx Heritage Month is celebrated through a series of events put together by La Casa Latina and other collaborating groups. And as you can see on the schedule here, it was just a month full of a lot of different events, including some of the signature events we saw last slide, like the Cafecito Brunch. And then something that started off as a tradition last October, was the Taste of Latinx Philly, which we will talk a little bit more in a bit. So Taste of Latinx Philly, it was just a day where La Casa brought in a lot of different cuisines. There was a schedule at what time the cuisines were coming out, and throughout the whole day, there was just a long line outside of La Casa Latina for people wanting to get very delicious food. There's always music playing, so there was like a little dance floor happening on in the corner. And people just came out and showed their pride, showed, you know, where their family's from, where they're from, and we're just, you know, creating this very big sense of community and pride and love for our countries. So these are just some pictures from that event. This was the Cafecito brunch that also happened within the celebration. A picture of some of our students. With Latinx Heritage Month, we did a collaboration with Penn Cooks, and we were able to bring in Chef Cristina Martinez, and she hosts she's the owner of 2 restaurants in South Philly. She was able to come into one of the kitchens in Gutman Hall and actually took part in preparing the food and being able to interact with students. And while we were eating dinner with her, she just also sat down and kind of like shared her life story with us. It was a very intimate moment. And it was a moment that I know a lot of our students appreciated, including myself, just to be seen and like the food that we're eating at school, right? Food is such an important part of our culture. So it was a very powerful moment for all of us. One of our events was Joteria y Loteria. This is one of our pictures from that event. And then we also brought in a poet, and she was able to just have a session with us. She guided us through a writing session as well. Again, a very intimate and very powerful moment. And then within Latinx Heritage Month, we wanted to highlight the Dolores Huerta lecture. So this is an event that traditionally happens every time we celebrate Latinx Heritage Month, at least at the University of Pennsylvania. And this is an event where we bring in a speaker who has generated positive change within their community. And again, they're brought in through La Casa Latina and other collaborating organizations. Last year for the Dolores Huerta lecture, we brought in Eflen Olivares, and he's a deputy legal director at Southern Poverty Law Center's Immigrant Justice Project in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also an alum from Penn. And these are some pictures from that event. So this was taken at the GIC for a brunch that we had with him. There's Krista and I. And then other program assistants from La Casa. This was a picture taken from one of the lectures he was giving at Penn. And then this is a picture from a book signing we had also at Penn. And so it was just a series of events that was hosted to learn more about him, but also about the work that he does and the impact that it's generated. And it started a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue within our community. We'll talk about constituent groups in a bit, but for example, there's a group on campus called Penn for Immigrant Rights. And I think this series of events was very helpful as this group was up and coming, and it just served as, you know, a way to how to create conversation, how to bring up topics, and just how to go about having difficult conversations like that. But overall, a very, very good event. And then Festival Latinx. This is another tradition that happens at Penn, traditionally in the spring. It's a week-long event started by Penn Latinx students that celebrates culture and creates dialogue throughout the community. This event is also student-led, and it has worked throughout the years to bridge the gap between different cultural communities and the Penn and Philly Latinx communities. So I have a very close relationship with Festival. I have been planning this event I helped plan this event this year and also last year. And last year was the first time that I started up again since COVID. And it's an event that, I mean, as you can see, our week is very full, but it's just an event that brings so many people out together. It's an event that welcomes people that haven't been in our community before, that are just now trying to get more involved with the Latinx community. This year was our 40th year of it happening, so we wanted to make it very big. And I mean, this was done in collaboration with a lot of different groups. And I'll show you in a bit all of the pictures that we took, and it was just a very amazing event. I feel like I'm speechless because a lot of effort went in, and it was very, very beautiful at the end. So these are some of the events that we hosted. Suelta la Sopa, which is a faculty brunch. And this is pictures from that event. There's also Churros y Chisme, where we had people come in. We brought in churros and Mexican food, and we just spent the day playing board games, talking to each other, playing Mario Kart in La Salita. So that's that. We had Que Picante, which was a dancing lesson with Onda Latina. And so they helped us, learn some basic bachata and salsa moves. Sancocho night is our traditional kickoff night. This is where we come together and we bring in a speaker, but we also all have dinner together in the main floor of the Arch building, which is where our cultural centers are. This year we brought Angel Ortiz. He works at Esperanza in North Philly. And it was just very inspiring to hear from him, hear his story, how he grew up and what inspired him to make the choices for his career. He also works with Impacto newspaper, which is the first bilingual newspaper in Philadelphia. So it was just very powerful to hear from him. We also had Pelotazo, which was a kickball tournament. And we brought in a food truck. We played at Penn Park. And it was a very competitive night, but definitely very fun. The tacos were very good. And I mean, the pictures we got with the skyline were amazing. We had Tejiendo con Ternura, where this was a knitting and embroidery workshop held at Education Commons. And so people were able to make like knitted heart earrings. And I think they also were able to embroider like tote bags and pencil cases. And then my favorite event from this year was Vamos al Tianguis, which was like an impromptu flea market that we hosted in the main floor of the Arch building. And this is where we brought in local artisans, local nonprofits, and we hosted them in Arch. And we welcomed all of the students to come in and be able to learn more about the organizations that are helping our communities, but also be able to support our communities and seeing the work that they do and the work that they're selling. A key event with Festival Latinx is the procession of flags. So the procession of flags happens also for Latinx Heritage Month, but while that is more geared towards people celebrating their pride and in general, the bigger Latinx community, but the procession of flags for Festival Latinx focuses more on the Latinx community in Penn. And so we celebrate this event with all of the Latinx constituent groups, the Latinx clubs, and it's just more geared towards the Latinx communities that are active and taking place at Penn. And these are just some pictures. The procession of flags is like a 15-minute walk that we do on Locust Walk, which is our main walkway. We begin on the high-rise field where all of the dorms are, and we walk all the way over across the bridge to the Arch building. And as we're doing this, we're playing music, we're chanting, we're carrying our country's flags, and it's a beautiful moment to witness. If you guys want to read more about it, the Daily Pennsylvanian, our school newspaper, published an article about Festival Latinx, and our pictures are there too. To go over the Latinx Coalition. So the Latinx Coalition is one of the 7 boards on campus. It represents Latinx students, and it is the umbrella group for all of the Latinx clubs that are active. This is a picture of the current board for this year. And it consists of an internal chair, an external chair, a finance chair, an operations chair, an admissions chair, and also a programming chair. So some of the tasks that they do is they meet with administration and they bring up concerns. They promote constituent group events. They advocate for funding and manage constituent group applications. And they create an inclusive and supportive space for the Latinx community. So the Latinx Coalition is just kind of a group that, it's the face of the Latinx community. They host like bi-weekly meetings with the entire Latinx student population, meetings where you have fun, you get to eat food and you get to know each other, but you also bring up concerns that are happening within your community. You bring up things that you want to change in regards to how you lead a student group or how student groups function. So while it has its social aspects, it also has its advocacy aspects. And like I mentioned, it's one of 7 boards. So there's different boards that represent different student groups on campus. The Latinx Coalition represents Latinx students on campus. And so some of the constituent groups or the clubs that fall under the LC are the ones listed here. These clubs are not Latinx exclusive, but rather they're Latinx inspired, and they're open to everyone and anyone that wants to join. All of these groups put on their own programming and they collaborate with each other and outside groups and La Casa Latina throughout the year. So some of these groups are Istmo y Voz, which is the Central American Identifying Student Group. There's MEXA Penn, there's Causa, which is the Cuban American Undergraduate Student Association. There is La Vida Magazine. La Vida Magazine, I'm a part of La Vida Magazine. They produce a yearly magazine each spring. So they prepare all year. They get submissions from students. They take pictures at all of the events, and it's really just a compilation of all of the events and all of the feelings and everything that has happened throughout the year. There's Onda Latina, which is our Latinx dance troupe. There's Mecha, which is another group for Mexican students at Penn. We have Fuerza, which is our only Latinx inspired musical group on campus. We have Latinx sororities and fraternities. So we have LUL, Lambda, Upsilon Lambda, we have Lambda Theta Alpha, and we also have SLU. And then we have Mujeres Empoderadas, CIPACLI, which is a Latinx Honor Society. And like Krista mentioned in the very beginning, we do have about 15 active student groups. So not all of the groups on here, or like not all of the active groups are on here, but there's Grupo Quisqueyano, which represents Dominican and Haitian students on campus. I can't think of any other groups off of the top of my head, but there's definitely a lot of groups on campus. And they're open to everyone that's willing to join. And when at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the fall semester, there's a thing called the SAC Festival, where all of the clubs are out on College Green and they table. And most of our clubs are out on College Green tabling, putting information out there for people that want to join. And so to move on to our campus partnerships, like I mentioned earlier, La Casa Latina is one of 6 cultural resource centers. The other 5 are listed here. So there's the LGBTQ Center, there's Patch, Pan Asian American Community House, there's the GIC, which is the Albert M. Greenfield Intercultural Center, MACU, which is the Black Cultural Center, and then also the Penn Women's Center. Apart from the Cultural Resource Center, some other campus partners we have are restorative practices facilitators. We partner with the College of Arts and Sciences as one of our directors as a pre-major advisor. And then we also partner with Penn Violence Prevention, which is an anti-violence advocates. And actually with Penn Violence Prevention, the Latinx Coalition requires all of the groups to undergo a session with Penn Violence Prevention, just so everyone in our community is educated about the resources that are on hand and just how to navigate certain situations. So all of these groups on campus, they're very organized. They all have their own constitutions about the number of roles that they will have in a club, how they function, how voting votes, how membership works. And while it sounds a little complicated, that's for board members, but I just want to emphasize how these clubs are organized in their structure, and they leadership at the school is very organized, very structured. And then I guess something else I wanted to mention with the cultural resource centers. Uh, we do a lot of events in collaboration with each other. At least each fall and each spring, we hold the Cultural Resource Center Festival, which will happen sometimes outside of Arch or inside or in other places around campus. But we all come together and just, we have food, we have music, we set up a series of like crafts and arts that people can do together. And sometimes it's a series of events where we have different events going on throughout like a weekend per se. But there's a lot of interaction that happens within these groups, as within our student population, there's so much intersectionality. And we just want to be inclusive of everyone and be able to open up as many places for people to feel comfortable in and for them to feel themselves and find community in. Some of the community partnerships that we have are with the League of United Latin American Citizens, Motivos Magazine. They're a group that comes in, I believe every month, and uses La Casa space just to host meetings, to be able to have their planning committee come in and, also be able to learn about a new space. And then also with Esperanza High School. And that's kind of the end of our presentation. So we just have some links up here for everyone to connect with us, to follow us on Instagram, La Casa Latina U Penn at Facebook, and then on Instagram, it's at Casa Latina Penn. There's a QR code. The QR code directly links you to the Instagram. And then if you're interested in learning about other student groups, Casa Latina Penn they follow all of the active Latinx constituent groups. And you can see all of the events that we've done in collaboration with each other and with other different organizations on campus. But definitely connect with us. We're very excited to see new faces, to introduce new people to our center. It's honestly, La Casa Latina has been my saving grace. It's a place I'm at every single day, even now during the summer. But yeah, we hope you enjoy your presentation. We hope that if you do decide to visit us, come in, talk to Krista, talk to me, talk to anyone. Everyone's very welcoming. But yeah, that was it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evelyn, and Dr. Krista Cortez too. She's having some connectivity issues, but we're all here to help answer questions. And we do definitely have time for questions. I know that they've been coming in with the Q&A feature, so feel free to keep those coming. But I did kind of jot down some of the big questions that we've received so far. If Evelyn wants to kind of help tackle these with the time that we have remaining. And one that's kind of timely to one of the slides that you actually just went over, Evelyn. I think it was, let's see, someone asked, you mentioned dealing with issues, and have there been any instances that you could share and how you worked with it? If you want to take that question.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat your question real quick?
Yeah, so you mentioned dealing with issues. Have there been any instances that you could share and how you worked with it?
Issues like, I mean, they're all.
Yeah, I think it was tied to potentially the Latinx coalition.
Oh, I see. Let me go back to that slide. I think one of the issues that was very prominent in my first 2 years here was space that is given to not only Latinx students, but all of the other cultural centers, people of color, people. It just felt like there was not enough space for us, especially when we would host really big events. There was just sometimes some difficulty in like booking rooms, or like there was always some overlap with other groups. And so at least for my first 2 years here, something that the Latinx Coalition took on was advocating for more space on campus. And I think just last year, the Arch building was given to these student groups. So with a lot of that pushing and those meetings with administration, we were able to, sit down and talk about these issues with them. And in turn, we were able to, I don't know if be given is the correct term, but now we have full access to the entire Arch building, which is a step up. And it's a lot easier for student groups to hold events there now. And for us to just feel more comfortable in the spaces that we're given. So I think that's one of the issues that I thought of, and that's an issue that was prominent, not just for my first 2 years here, but for years before I got here. Yeah, I think that's the one I will comment on.
Great, thank you. Another question that we just got from a student or an attendee was, how have your Wharton classes specifically influenced you in your role with La Casa Latina?
And sorry, repeat the last part.
How have your Wharton classes influenced you in your role with La Casa Latina?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I'm studying management and social impact. And so my focus, at least under management, is organizational leadership. I think being able to take classes that go over, how to be a good leader, how to have that self and social awareness, what are things that make teamwork work, what are things that make teamwork efficient, like just going over some of the things and going over like team simulations and practices and readings and lectures. I think that has helped me a lot in terms of when I take leadership roles and the student group. So like I mentioned, I was a part of Festival. I didn't mention this, but I was also chair of finance for the Latinx Coalition. And so I think a lot of those classes in Warren kind of helped me navigate, how to have kind of like professional language when you're working with people, how to navigate team conflicts. When you're on a board, a lot of people come in with a lot of different opinions, and you have to have conversations, you have to disagree. You have to work throughout all of those conflicts to come to a conclusion, because at the end of the day, you are leading a club and you are leading and representing other people. So I think in terms of what I'm studying management, that's how it has helped me. And also, like at least with the Warren curriculum, you're required to take not basic fundamentals, but business fundamentals. So they're required to take a couple classes from each different department. So like accounting, finance, management, marketing. And I guess like all of that has given me some background knowledge. Like how do I make a pretty flyer that conveys a lot of information, and how do I post it on Instagram and generate engagement so people actually come to my event? So I think now that I think about it, Wharton has been very helpful with with how I interact in clubs.
Great. So this is a question more tied towards something that Dr. Cortez mentioned earlier, but she mentioned that the La Casa Latina Center offers Latin students help with achieving leadership opportunities. How does the center accomplish this with the resources that La Casa has?
I don't know if Krista wants to take on this.
I know she might not be able to, just again with her internet connectivity issues. So if not, we can totally move on to some other questions we have.
Answer a bit. So La Casa, in regards to opportunities, right?
Yes, leadership opportunities specifically.
La Casa, the people working in La Casa, and Dr. Krista Cortez can say this, they have a lot of connections. They know a lot of the resources that take place on campus. They know a lot of the people on campus. And so when it comes to leadership opportunities, I would say if you're getting involved in whatever campus you are, definitely create connections, like genuine connections, like go into centers, meet people, have conversations with people, be able to generate that connection, because then these people that are tied to a lot of resources get to know you and get to know the things that you want to do, what your career looks like, what your goals are like, what your aspirations are like. And so because Dr. Krista Cortez oversees all of the Latinx kind of like community, if I were to go in and like I shared all of these things with her, she would be like, oh, I think you would be a very good fit for this group. She was one of the people that encouraged me to run as finance chair for the LC. And to this day, they're still telling me what groups I would be a very good fit in. And I think by building that connection with not just Krista, but also other people in La Casa Latina. They're able to let you know what groups you would be a good part of. But besides that, they also like La Casa Latina sends people to conferences. I've been sent to a conference at Brown University through La Casa Latina. Other people have been sent to conferences in Portland. And so they're able to, connect you to these opportunities, because the more they know you, the more they know how they can help you, right? Yeah.
And then some more questions kind of more specific to you, Evelyn, that we've been getting, but which activities or aspects of La Casa Latina helped you feel the most at home on campus, specifically during your freshman year?
Well, my freshman year, my fall semester was at home due to COVID. And then my spring semester was, it was on campus, but most of the buildings were closed and all of the classes were still on Zoom. So I can't speak too much of my freshman year. I know before I came on campus as a freshman, through the P program, through the Penn Early Exploration Program, La Casa Latina was one of the centers I first visited. And I think something that made me feel very, very, very comfortable was that the students like immediately started talking to me. And so every time you walk into the center, and this happens, this is something that I think our community does a lot, is every time someone walks in, it's like, hey, good morning, how are you? Just like, that instant welcoming feeling. I think it was people in the center talking to me and being very interested in getting to know me. Because at the end of the day, that's how you build community and how you bring people into the community. Once things started opening up a little more, I think it was also having events where there's food and there's music. And like I said earlier, food and music are a very, very big part of our culture. And so just being able to sit down and have a meal with someone at a space where you see things about your culture, right? We have a mural in La Casa Latina, we have papel picado, we have piñatas, we have frames, we have books. It's just a space where you feel seen. And
Awesome. And another kind of some common questions that we've been getting is like service opportunities and kind of how La Casa Latina helps support the Philadelphia community and just the community kind of around the University of Pennsylvania. So how does La Casa Latina offer community service opportunities within different events or kind of initiatives, or is there a separate club for that specifically?
Yeah, I think La Casa helps by, in general, just sharing things that are going on within the community. But I think there are more clubs, or a lot of clubs do more of the act of volunteering. I'm a part of CIPACLI, which is the Latinx Honor Society, and one of the requirements of being a part of the Honor Society is you have to do a certain number of volunteer commitments around the community. So I've done volunteering through the Latinx Honor Society. With Festival, one of our events was, it wasn't necessarily going into the community, but we sat down and we wrote cards to children that are hospitalized. And because of language barriers, there's just a lack of cards being written in Spanish. So we wrote all of our cards in Spanish and we sent them out. Last year with Festival, we also, I think we partnered with Norristown Neighborhood Garden Projects. And it was just us going out to a garden. So there are resources shared by La Casa Latina, but I think the clubs are the ones that do the actual active, going out, volunteering, getting together. Yeah.
And to kind of add on to that a little bit too, I think one of Penn's kind of biggest missions is just civic engagement. So whether that's through La Casa or the different clubs that are available to our students, there's again hundreds and hundreds to choose from. There's so many different ways to engage with Philadelphia, the surrounding community, and also beyond that. So just as a kind of a plug there too. And shifting a little bit more like to an academic focus for students that are interested in courses like Latinx focused classes. How many classes at Penn are focused on the contributions of Latinas, and are there any Latinx focused classes at Penn that students can take?
Yeah, so there's we have the Center for Latinx and Latin American Studies. And so they, with that center, they put together classes that make up the Latin American Studies minor. So there are a series of classes that you can take on campus that are geared towards Latin American history, Latin American art, apart from like the regular Spanish, like language and Spanish, like text and contextualization classes. So I've taken a Spanish course that focuses on Spanish history, that's Spanish history, but I've taken a course with Johnny Irizarry. He was the previous director of La Casa Latina for, I think, about 12 years. And he teaches, I think, Latin American art. And it's a 3-hour class. It's a once a week. You sit and you just talk about art and how the art that came from Latin American artists has mobilized people, has mobilized movements. Him being a professor, he's also an artist too. So he does a lot of work in the community, and he volunteers with Taller Puertorriqueño in North Philly. And again, like, he's also a person that has a lot of resources and can connect you to a lot of people and can even tell you what other classes you would want to take. But there is a couple of classes that you can take under that. I know he also does an ABCS course, which is like a class that also focuses on volunteering in the community. I'm not sure what that class is called, but I think it's focused towards education, like Latin American education.
For those of you that don't know, the ABCS courses here at Penn are called academically based community service courses. We like our acronyms here, but those are basically just courses that you can take in any major that allow you to really engage. It's much more hands-on and kind of in the community rather than in the classroom. So tying back to that engagement piece here at Penn. In terms of like the size of La Casa Latina, some questions we've been getting is like how many members does La Casa Latina have from year to year? Kind of what the size of the community looks like at Penn in general.
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to give you like a number. La Casa Latina, they're open to all of the students at Penn. So it's not just undergraduate students, it's also grad students. It's students pursuing their doctorate. It's students that have graduated but are working nearby and still stop by. So, and again, it's also not just Latin American students. It's all of the students that come in. There's a lot of, La Casa offers like free printing services. So a lot of students come in also on that and for our events. I think the Latinx student number is like about 1,000 at our school. But I would say that like La Casa serves a lot more people than that. So while it is pretty big, like you don't see 1,000 people in La Casa every day, but like you do feel that like big and inclusive community. I don't know if that really answers the question.
That's perfect. Yeah, I know numbers are hard since, again, it isn't necessarily like a membership that students have to have for, again, going into the physical space on campus, but that's helpful again to kind of gauge what the size of the community looks like for students asking.
Yeah, and you don't have to like be like La Casa Latina, it doesn't require like a membership or anything. Like you just go in and like you just go in.
Yeah. Welcoming for everybody. Another question that we got is from kind of a first generation student perspective. A student was wondering kind of how La Casa Latina supports students specifically in their academics as they are joining a more rigorous academic community and environment. And again, especially for students, they're the first in their family to attend college.
Yeah, I think I'm also a first-gen student. I come from Austin, Texas, so I'm a little far away from home, but I think La Casa has been honestly a very big help personally. I think one, they help by making you feel seen, making you feel heard, just in general, like by bringing in food and music that reminds you of home. I think that's something that helps a lot with like what's like imposter syndrome and like that thought of like, I know when I was first on campus, I was like, oh my God, should I be here? Should I not? Like maybe there's another place for me. But you know, if wherever you get in, whatever place you hold, like you're meant to be there. And I think La Casa is something that has made me realize that um, through just like the physical structure, the physical being of it being there, but also through the events that they hold. I know we had a lot of dialogues about like, what is imposter syndrome? How do you navigate feeling like this at school? How do you navigate like asking for help? How do you navigate like, you know, how to um like create discipline with yourself, or like manage time. And so La Casa helps with that as well. And I think on a personal level, like I'm very close to the staff in La Casa, just because I spend so much time there. But you know, there was a time last year where I had to be out of classes for about a week due to an emergency, and it was just very difficult for me to like navigate how to find help. But talking to Krista, I remember going in, I had to go in because at the time I was like chair of finance for the Latinx Coalition, and I had to like order food for an event, but I was like very much in pain due to an emergency. And she was like, oh, how are you? Like just being very welcoming. And I immediately broke down. But like I feel like that goes to speak just how comfortable I felt and how like open to vulnerability the space makes me feel. Like I've definitely cried a lot of times in La Casa Latina, and I never feel judged for it. But in talking to her about my situation, she was able to connect me with student, I forget the acronym or the name, but like just a center or like a department that helps students like, you know, how to navigate asking for help. So like instead of me having to email all of my professors individually and you know reschedule my exams and things like that, Krista reached out to them, and then they were able to like all at once contact my professors and speak on my behalf, because at the time I couldn't. And so they were able to like speak on my behalf. They were very understanding. I think is it student restorative? No, it's not restorative practices. So I'll see if I can remember the name. But you know, just having that really tight connection with her and being part of that community, like all of the staff and everyone in La Casa wants the best for you. And you know, we're all going through a similar journey. And so I think like as a first generation student, having that cultural resource center and then having staff that supports you, I think it was very helpful for me to like settle here and be able to ask for help. So I think it's an amazing resource that Penn is very lucky to have, that first gen students, Latinx students are very, very lucky to have.
Yeah. Awesome. And kind of on that same note, talking about like how La Casa Latina supports not only Latinx students, and again, all students, but also first-gen students. One of the questions we got was talking about kind of all of these different cultural Latinx celebrations. Are they also in conjunction with LGBTQ plus or people of color club celebrations that Penn has? Yeah, I guess if you could speak more how those kind of happen alongside one another.
Yeah. So like we mentioned, there's 6 total cultural centers on campus. And you know, maybe that's not inclusive of everyone, but we try to be as inclusive as we can. And that's why we're always, you know, striving for more space. But with those cultural centers, there is a lot of collaboration that happens. So I guess like one of the things I thought of, I think this was for, I don't remember what month this was for, or if there was like if it was with a series of events, but La Casa did a collaboration with the LGBTQ Center, and we talked about inclusive language in Spanish. Like I know, like for example, like we have they, them as inclusive pronouns in English, but how would we say that in Spanish? So like ella, and there was like that event. There was also like for Black History Month, we also do a series of events with Maku. One of the events that I showed earlier for programming. Oh, if my computer doesn't freeze. Maybe I cannot go fully. Oh, maybe. There's a lot of slides. But one of the events that we hosted was like the Cafecito, which is the weekly event that we have, but it was like geared towards like Black History Month and having that conversation of intersectionality of what it can be to be like Afro Latinx and like other topics that fall under that. I know also for Festival last year, we had a series of workshops on intersectionality. So we had a workshop on like, you know, what does it look like or feel like to be Asian Latinx? What are issues underlying with the Afro Latinx community? What are things that we can talk about for the queer Latinx community? So we always try to like do these events for people that are a part of different communities, and just try to like bring that together. There's always a lot of different collaborations going on.
Right. And we have gotten a few of these questions in the Q&A feature that I know our admissions staff on the call have been answering, but just to seems to be a pretty popular question, but there's some people on the call that are wondering if it's possible to visit La Casa Latina if they were to visit Penn for a college campus visit.
Yeah. La Casa Latina is always open, even throughout the summer. It's open every day throughout the week. Well, Monday through Friday. People there. But La Casa Latina, along with Macu and Patch, are located in the Arch Building, which is on 3601 Locust Walk. It's right in the corner. It's like directly across from the love sign if you visit. But you can always just like walk into the space, the general space itself. We host a lot of events and there's a lot of like the cultural centers kind of spread out all over the building. But La Casa Latina is open Monday through Friday. Every day, come in, stop by, talk to one of us. Yeah, I would really recommend visiting the space. It made a difference for me when I came to visit Penn.
Absolutely. And then I am looking at the time, 4:55. So I'll sort of ask one more question to you, Evelyn, that's again a little bit more personal, but just after undergrad, since you are headed into your senior year, what is really something that you'll miss the most about this community here?
Oh, I think everything. Like a lot of people, when they come to Penn, they get involved in a lot of different types of clubs. I don't know for what reason, but I've only stuck to like La Casa Latina and these Latinx clubs and constituent groups. I don't know. I think Penn does a very good job in like promoting community. La Casa Latina does a very good job in, you know, making people feel seen and bringing in food, different types of cuisines, right? Like there's like the Latinx community is very different in and of itself. So we try to represent everyone. I think it's just that feeling of like knowing that I've built these tight friendships with people within the community and we're like right next to each other. And so like leaving this makes me sad because I have like a year left, but you know, just knowing that like you've built so many memories within these clubs and in this space. And so I don't know, it's not a very like precise answer, but yeah, I'll just miss like everything, I guess.
Yeah.
I wanna, hi everyone. I've been in the shadows. My connection is poor. But I did just want to say something before we depart. Thank you all for joining. I think, Evelyn, it was really wonderful for them to really hear from your perspective as a current student about your experience here at Penn. We are happy to welcome folks into our space. I was trying to reply to questions and I don't know if it worked, but we're not always available to meet with folks one-on-one, but if you did want to, you know, send us an email and let us know when you were coming, we do try our best to make sure someone's there to receive folks when they come in. But when the space is welcome, you're always free to stop by. And I just wanted to also say very quickly, I saw someone put something in the chat about like Afro-Latina people and like our space. Both myself and Rosaline identify as Afro-Latina, and we do, because of that, think that it's really important to emphasize the Black diaspora in Latin America and the Latin American diaspora in across Africa. To that end, we do a lot of programming in this space. I think There are quite a number of Afro-Latinx students on campus, and we do a lot of programming to that end. So if you ever wanted to chat more about that, also feel free to email us and follow us on Instagram
Yeah.
at Casa Latina Penn.
Oh, I have to go through all the slides.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that slide here in just a minute, but just want to thank Evelyn and Krista for all of your lovely answers and just information. And seeing in the chat a lot of people just being like, this has been so great. So I definitely learned a lot too, and just want to thank all of our attendees for tuning in for the past hour to learn more about not only Penn, but the different resources that are available for our students and their various identities. There we go. But if you guys want to, again, stay in touch, definitely encourage you to do so. This relationship doesn't stop just after the event. But you can always reach out to myself, Penn Admissions, but also, again, La Casa Latina, as you are looking for answers kind of in the middle of your college search. But yeah, thank you guys again so much for your time. It's great to connect, and stay tuned for more virtual events that come your way.